So we have another scenario that we want to introduce to you, and this is for couples who are in their 60s and 70s who are thinking about separating but are afraid because of many aspects of insecurity that they're feeling about their age and their future and their financial situation. So in my practice, I oftentimes see people who have been in chronically unhappy situations with their spouses. And there's been a lot of conflict, and the conflict has been unresolved. Sometimes there's someone that has a mental health issue or an addiction issue, and people feel like after 30 or 40 years that it's really hard to get out of that kind of relationship, that there's such a dependency in emotionally and also financially and physically and logistically, that it's impossible to figure out a solution. So I see people, and I have people come into my practice saying, what can we do? It feels sometimes when I'm working with these folks that it's too hard to sit and go from the very beginning to try to reconstruct the emotional relationship to be healthier. And so oftentimes I find myself strategizing with each couple of how to have a more independent, healthier life, where they might start really teasing out their dependency on the person and their stuckness in the unhappiness of the relationship. So that's one angle that I work on with folks. But I know there's a lot of fear that comes up, and so I often send them to a paralegal or a mediator or a lawyer to work on what are their other options if they feel like physically they can't stay in the same space with the person, that it's really unhealthy, and maybe even something that is making them feel unsafe. So I wondered if you could address how you would work with someone in this situation.
Sure. So it's very difficult, as you mentioned. They come in, and we have to decide, you know, what the main issue is. How unsafe is it? Because that's usually what's going to trigger either a divorce or a legal separation. Now, oftentimes, it could be about money. A lot of times people at this stage in life, they want to retire, and they have different spending habits. And one is spends a lot and the other saves a lot, and they just totally different, and they're afraid that their retirement's going to go down the drain. But so what we do is we have a heart-to-heart talk and see if they really want to divorce, or if they want to first legally separate, do it legal separation, which is going to divide all their financial assets and set up orders for support if that's warranted. But sometimes in a legal separation, one party can keep the other party's benefits, health insurance and benefits through their company or their retirement plan. So they have to actually check with the plan to see if that's the case, because in some instances there will be pre-existing conditions or they just have a great insurance plan, and they can't leave it for anything. So if they decide that they definitely have to divorce or legally separate, we'll proceed with the legal process. Other options are to do what's called a postnuptial agreement, which is when an agreement that you are living together. I mean, you're still married. You don't have to live together, and it can change the community property definition of income, and thus, and this is not legal advice, but each party could keep their own incomes. They can separate, their debts, their assets if they choose to. They can own some jointly. They can decide what they want to do about everything. And we also put in some clauses if they should ever proceed to a dissolution, that the clauses in the postnuptial agreement will stand. And they can also, if they decide to do that, then do a living trust. And they can designate who's going to receive which assets, as they may not, they may have changed who they want to inherit.
Right. So just to talk about one thing. So the postnup seems like it's a safety plan. It's a way of kind of stopping whatever is nerve-wracking for one of the parties. and feeling like they can at least have some control over their future in this way.
Right.
Would you say that's how it is?
Yes, it's definitely a safety plan. It's often used on money issues if one's a big spender and has a lot of debt and the other doesn't.
Hmm.
So it's used for that. Now, if it's basically an emotional situation where they just can't stand the other, I mean, and they want to live separately, we can do that. But, we have to look at everything and see what works for them. I mean, these are some very tough issues, and they have to be looked at individually, and so that the parties can decide the best method. But a post-nup works great.
Well, I
To
think one of the things to think about, and I think you're saying this really well, is that this is a conversation, just like coming into my office and working on the emotional relationship, or even facing that the emotional relationship has not been worked on for years, and that here the couple is at this stage, and they want to figure out what to do that's going to make them comfortable. And typically there's one person that's really the more uncomfortable party, that's really pushing for something to change, and they might not be able to get as big of a change as they want. So
right,
the change might have to be safety on one hand, and then emotionally accepting some things that won't change in the relationship. But there can be a discussion. And I think the longer people wait for the discussion, the more tension builds up. And just like I always tell people in couples therapy, like when you start having these chronic patterns or problems, to seek help then. But sometimes, years go by and people don't address things. They figure out how to parallel live. And then there's a certain time where people start getting really concerned about their livelihood or their future.
right.
And at this point is another time where I see couples coming in saying, what are we going to do? Or I'm so unhappy, or they are running through all the money, or those are the concerns that come up. And so it's good that there's a place where they can have a discussion with you, a heart to heart. Where is another place that we can go?
Right. Yes, we provide a very safe place so they can talk about the whole, anything. And it often, too, once the children leave the home, then the parties are looking, they realize they don't have that much in common anymore.
Right.
And
And that's a
so
real typical time where
it is.
folks do seek to separate. They've kind of done their job of raising their kids together and hung in there and kept their commitment to
Mhm.
that phase of life. And now it might be time for a change.
Yes, there's all different sorts of issues. I've had clients too where one party has Alzheimer's or something like that. And we have to look at their individual circumstances, and I might refer them out to an elder law attorney to help with that. That is an issue that's come up quite a bit, to see whether divorce is best or if there are other ways to manage that. It's a very sad issue, but it has to be addressed,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
it can be very expensive, the care. It is very expensive.
Well, I'm glad that at least there's a place where they can go and even get some advice about what to do next.
Yes.
And also couples can sit with me and talk about emotionally what they feel like they need to strategize to do this next chapter. So I hope that people heard some things in this case study, and the ways that we work with this that would be helpful to either apply to your own situation or pass on to somebody who is having a similar scenario go on for them. So thanks again for listening.